it would be necessary as humans to be spacefaring beings. Otherwise, if we're not, and as you said, we're due to it for another situation on planet Earth, we may not survive in the long term. So I think what you're saying is we need to become spacefaring beings.
We have to if we want to survive. So for the long term, we need to think about alternatives to Earth. And you know, interestingly, the nearest star to the Earth, it's called Proxima Centauri. Just last year, less than a year ago, it was discovered that this star, which is 12% of the mass of the Sun, it's a dwarf star, a smaller star. It has a planet like the Earth, a mass that is of order somewhere between 30% more or twice larger than the Earth. Just at the right distance from that star to have liquid water on its surface. That's called the habitable zone. We don't know if there is liquid water. We know that liquid water is a necessary condition for life. And to have liquid water, you need to be at the right distance from the furnace, which is the star. So since this star is less massive than the Sun, it's much fainter. So the planet is 20 times closer to that star than the Earth is from the Sun. And it orbits around every 11.2 days.
It's like my birthday every 11.2 days.
Exactly.
Interesting.
It's a wonderful place to be. You celebrate birthday every 11 days. And I actually tried to convince some of my wealthy friends to buy real estate on this planet because, you know, in the long term, the value will only go up. This star, Proxima Centauri, will live for 1,000 times longer than the Sun because it burns its nuclear fuel very slowly. And so it would live for trillions of years. And when the Sun will die in 7 billion years, that's a possible place to go to. These dwarf stars are the most common, actually, type of stars. So an interesting question is, why are we finding ourselves next to a star like the Sun? Why don't we find ourselves next to more common stars like Proxima Centauri that are less massive, they would live longer? And that's an unsolved problem. We would like to know whether there is life around these stars. And one way to find out is to look at them from a distance. Another one is to send a camera that would take close-up pictures of that planet, and that's what Starshot is about.
What hurdles would an advanced alien civilization have to overcome to get to where they are? Do you think they would have to transcend the tensions between certain nations within their planet and be a peaceful nation? Or maybe perhaps what Stephen Hawking actually posits is, he suggests we better not ever come across aliens because these aliens will be nefarious and bad guys, actually. So,
well, it's a bit late now because we have been transmitting signals for more than 100 years. So there is a bubble of radiation propagating out from the Earth that reached more than 100 light years by now. This is a spherical bubble of a signal that we transmitted for 100 years. You know, it's possible they already noticed us. There aren't many stars within 100 light years. So the more time passes, the bigger is the potential population of those aliens that notice us. And then, you know, it will take them a while to get back. So we have a few centuries to, you know, live at peace and think that we are alone. But eventually we might hear from them, you know.
I mean, do you think that they would even care? Perhaps they just view us as, you know, when I walk on the sidewalk, there are ants, and sometimes I step on them, I kind of don't care. So, and I should, but, so maybe they just view us as ants.
That's quite possible. We might be so primitive that they don't really care about us. If their civilization is, let's say, has a head start of billions of years, they have answers to questions that we are pondering with. Yeah. And you know, in principle, we can get a shortcut to our progress by listening to them, by learning from them. We would feel inferior. It would feel bad. It would feel as if you are cheating in an exam where you are supposed to find a solution to a problem, but you are actually asking your neighbor for an answer. And your neighbor is much more intelligent, you know, so that's quite possible. Now, another thing to keep in mind is if they do move away from the planet they were born on, then perhaps most of those civilizations are not near stars. They send spacecrafts and they are roaming through space, and you know, at some point, you know, my real hope is that at some point we will detect a signal that comes from nowhere and is indicative of some advanced technology, and it has nothing to do with a star. And it's just a robot or a very advanced electronics or something that is passing by.
Let's say tomorrow aliens land. And I've always wondered, and I'm sure some folks here have wondered, what's the protocol? Does planet Earth have a protocol? What nations are going to step up? Is there any organization for, I mean, you're in the heart of all this right now. You are, with the Smithsonian, the Harvard University chair. I mean, if there's somebody who knows, it'll be you. So is there a type of protocol, or like what leadership happens if aliens?
This is an excellent question. There is, so aside from Breakthrough Starshot, which is funded at $100 million, there is a parallel project that I'm also a partner in, which is called Breakthrough Listen, also at a funding level of $100 million by the same funder, Yuri Milner.
Private or public funder?
Private. Yuri Milner from Silicon Valley is funding it, both of the projects. And Breakthrough Listen is aiming at listening, trying to detect an alien signal. And just in the last meeting of the advisory committee for this project, this question came up, and there is no good answer. As of now, there is no protocol for dealing. Part of it is because it's out of the mainstream. So whoever works on it hopes that there might be a signal detected, but it is always under the social pressure of believing that anything that is being seen is probably not artificial. So, but I do think that there should be a protocol. Now, of course, it would be there are these conspiracy theories that perhaps we already detected, the Air Force has some data and so forth. I think, when we look at the government, it's clear that they have a hard time keeping a secret, and it seems to me that, if there is a detection of something that is unambiguously artificial in origin from the sky, everyone will know about it very quickly.
Have you ever worked on classified projects for NASA or CIA? I'm not asking what they are, but have you ever engaged in them?
No.
No?
No.
Well,
Not
you?
no.
Okay. All right. I had to ask.
That's why I'm so innocent.
Yeah, exactly. He probably won't even tell me. That's right. Yeah.
That's actually a great benefit of being an immigrant to this country. It takes a while before the authorities recognize. And in fact, coming from Israel, they probably suspected that if they give me confidential information, it might be risky. So I can only speculate.
Do you think those who are in positions to take the ET issue seriously? I'm talking about military scientists, contractors, politicians. Have any of them contacted you, or just discuss, or just wonder if this could be serious?
So it's not only, since it's not part of the mainstream in astronomy, it's also not being attended to by other segments of society, engineering-wise or politics-wise. It used to be the case that if you go back 70 years ago or 50 years ago, that there were ongoing searches for radio signals and that were funded by
SETI, I think.
SETI, yeah, there is the SETI Institute. But since nothing was found, and they were looking for radio signals with instruments that are, by today's standard, very primitive. And also our imagination changed altogether, because right now we have cable TV, for example. We used to have radio transmission for TV and radio broadcasting. Now with cable, there is much less transmission going on. It's quite possible that if beyond a period of a few decades, such an advanced civilization will develop communication techniques that do not involve much leakage of radio waves. And they need to transmit intentionally. If they have someone like Stephen Hawking arguing that, we should stay quiet, they stay radio quiet.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting theory from Stephen Hawking. So Stephen Hawking is of the, he believes that we should really try to be under the radar, try not to contact any aliens, because if we do, he nearly guarantees that they're going to come here, they're going to be bad guys. They're going to mine Earth, they're going to slaughter us. If they have that kind of technology, they're not going to be benevolent towards us. That's Stephen Hawking's position.
I'm less pessimistic. I don't think we can tell what they are. I mean, if you look on Earth, it's clear that the bad guys didn't always win, right? So fortunately, in the history so far, it wasn't the case that the bad guys won.
But if you look at the native Indians, for example, in North America, and when the Europeans came, it was a little bit...
Right. So there is a risk. I think, it's a much safer approach to listen rather than to talk, And why don't we do that at first?
There's a theory out there that psychedelics is a way for aliens to communicate with humans. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I'm going to ask that. Sure. My brain is, to me at least, the most important organ in my body. Okay, so I don't experiment with it because if I make a mistake and something bad happens to my brain, I will not get paid. Let's put it this way. So I haven't tried any of these.
No, me neither.
I've never tried them, so I cannot tell for myself. Now, if other people tell me they see something, so the test of a scientific evidence is that it's reproducible, that you can come back and do the experiment again and again, and you will find a consistent answer, that other people can find the same answer if you tell them how, and that it gives you an edge in the sense of making predictions. Okay, so if you find psychedelics to be in that category of producing reproducible evidence that leads you in a direction of making predictions that can be tested otherwise, I'm all for it, but I haven't seen that evidence as of yet.
How do you think extraterrestrial disclosure would unfold? I mean, humbly speaking, do you think your research is the start of something?
Yeah, I think we now have, for the first time in history, the technologies that allow us to discover evidence for life out there. And it wasn't true decades ago. It's really a very special time because just over the past couple of decades, we discovered that other stars have planets like the Earth that are habitable. And not just other stars, but a quarter of all the stars in the Milky Way galaxy have habitable Earths. So it means that, once again, we are not special, that there are lots of planets out there, tens of billions in the Milky Way alone, 10 to the power 20 in the observable volume of the universe. So there are more habitable planets than grains of sand on all the beaches on Earth. And if you think about it, emperors or kings used to be proud of conquering a piece of land on Earth. They boasted about it. But if you think about it, they look just like an ant that hugs a grain of sand on the background of the landscape of a huge beach. And who cares about this ant hugging a tiny grain of sand compared to this huge beach? So if you look at the big picture, at how many planets are out there, you realize that we should be modest at how proud we are about things that we achieve here on Earth. At the same time, life on Earth is the most precious thing we have. And if we find evidence for it on another planet, that would be amazing. If we find evidence for an advanced technology on a spacecraft that is passing by, that would be even more remarkable. So I keep looking at the sky and in hope that we will find it.
So no plan B just yet?
No.
You're not going to the farm, you keep looking at the sky. That's good.
My wife actually says that if aliens ever land in our backyard, that she wants me to do two things. One is to leave the car keys with her, so not take them to the spaceship. And second, make sure that they don't ruin the loan.
One of the reasons why we're all here is that apparently there's been some technology that can measure these signals, these weird signals that we're getting from space, from the edge of the universe, as it were. And you theorize that they're not natural, that they're artificial, perhaps, in origin. Can you explain what you're talking about on that? If you could give us a crash course on, I think, what you call fast radio bursts and how they differ from standard radio bursts. So if you could just give us for us non-scientific folks, if you can give us a crash course on that.
Yeah, so in fact, yesterday, I came home at around 3 p.m. and I wrote an essay, a commentary that should appear next week. And the title is Cosmic Modesty. Basically, when I grew up, my mother used to tell me that it's a great virtue to be modest, and there are many reasons to be modest. But in the 30 years that I've been practicing astronomy, I discovered one additional reason, and that's the richness of the universe. Now, many people, so for centuries, people thought that perhaps, we are at the center of the universe, that the sun revolves around the earth, the stars revolve. We are sort of at the physical center of the universe. And that's a reasonable starting point because when I watched my daughters, they are in the audience, one is 11 years old, the other one is 15. When they were very young, they thought that the universe is centered on them. I mean, that's a natural thing to think. And later, as they developed, it was as if you watch an accelerated miniature of human history where you can see how they mature by getting a bigger perspective on their environment. So our humanity behaved this way. At first we thought everything is centered around us. Then we realized that we are not at the center of the physical universe. In fact, the Earth moves around the sun. The sun is circling around the center of the Milky Way galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy is just drifting in some random direction. And we are not at the center of the universe. So everyone agrees now that we are not really central to the universe. But some, or I should say a significant number of people, still believes that we are at the center of the biological universe. That,
I would say that some people still think that they're the center of the universe as well.
That's true. These people, you can split them to two categories: right. those that are simply arrogant, and those that are in institutions, right? But yeah, there are some people that stick to this notion still. I agree. So some people still believe that we are at the center of the biological universe, that life is rare, and that it's perhaps unique to Earth. My guiding principle is modesty. If we find life here, it's probably out there. We are not special. That's my working hypothesis. And if you adapt that, it has practical implications because it says we should search for it and we will find it. Now, the scientific community is sort of united in the notion that we should search for primitive life. So that's a mainstream subject now. Astronomers are looking for signatures of primitive life. For example, looking for molecules that are indicative of life in the atmospheres of planets around other stars. Okay, that's a mainstream activity that is well funded by federal agencies. However, searching for intelligent life, other civilizations, is outside the mainstream right now. It's not accepted as, and to me that's very surprising because the only place where we know life exists is here on Earth, and we find both primitive and intelligent forms of life on it. So we should look, in my opinion, we should just look around now and explore the universe without a prejudice.
As a scientist, what is better for you? Which funding would you rather tap into? People like Elon Musk or Yuri funding you, or government? And is there a tension between the two types of funding?
This is a very interesting question. In the past, through most of my career, I was funded by federal grants. But now, right now, I'm funded just by the private sector, foundations.
Is it because public funding has decreased? I know right now there's a movement these days about, there is this environment or energy right now in the US of the very anti-science tendencies and people wanting to argue against scientists and they want to put their own theories that are beyond science. I wonder if you're affected by that.
No, it's not that so much, but it's the fact that, well, first of all, scientific community grew. Okay, so there are more people requesting funding and the competition is more fierce. That's the main effect. And then you have a chance of 1 in 10 of being funded. And then the issue is, once the chance is 1 in 10, you have a selection committee that looks at a variety of proposals, and they tend to favor those proposals that go along the mainstream. those proposals that you can tell in advance what the investigators will find. So I find it really surprising that, for example, in the guidelines of NASA, sometimes you are being asked to forecast what you will discover in year 1, in year 2, in year 3. That's completely contrary to scientific discovery and exploration. And so selection committees become more conservative when the funding is tight, and because they say, oh, we need to have a guarantee that the taxpayers' money was used in a way that the taxpayer will not question its use. When you take risks, very often you fail. And so this entrepreneurship, taking risks, is not well suited for the climate that we are at right now. And so the private sector is much better at that.
But we went to the moon once, and that was a huge risk. What happened?
Well, that risk was taken when JFK announced it for political reasons. There was the competition with the Russians. It's possible that the competition with the Chinese at some point would lead to a similar situation. But it was not driven simply by the government wanting to take risks for the benefit of taking risks. Now, the private sector doesn't do it for scientific purposes either. They do it because they realize that by putting some money into risky endeavors, they get very well paid in the long run, because even if a small fraction of those projects succeed, they have ownership of a new technology that would later pay the rent. And so I think the same approach should apply to science, and I actually recommended to young people, I wrote a commentary on that, recommended that each scientist should dedicate at least a quarter of her or his research time to risky projects, so that you have to diversify your portfolio, the investment of research time, because otherwise you have very little chance of making discoveries. If you don't take risks, there is no way that you will find something unexpected. I once was on a PhD thesis committee where a student was tasked to check the validity of a very popular mainstream theory. And so the student started describing and saying, well, we actually compared the theory against data, and then I realized that there is a disagreement, and so I agreed with my thesis advisor that it's better to find out what kind of biases are there in the way that we analyze the data. Now, with this approach, there is no way you can find the theory to be wrong. And that, I think, is quite sad. Yeah. What you want is to be open-minded and allow the theories to fail, even if not for the right reason. Take risks and just explore, just like kids try to figure out things. I think that's the healthiest approach, because when we put barriers, if you look at the history of discovery, when we put barriers and say, this thing cannot be found, we know that there is no intelligent life out there, or we think that it's very rare, that makes no sense. Then obviously it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We will not find it.
What's your prognosis for the sort of world everyone in this room will see in their lifetime? So not in millions of years, but in decades. And what do you want to see for the future of your children?
Right. So I would like to see the phase spacecraft leaving the solar system, going into the next star, the vicinity of the next star. I think that it's possible that once we make that leap, when we leave our solar system, we might get a signal from out there, welcome to interstellar space, as if we advance to a technological level that is worth noticing. That to me is a great milestone. That's why I'm involved in Starshot. Another thing, I would like to find out if there is life elsewhere, and it could be in the solar system. For example, there are these plumes coming off Enceladus, one of the moons around Saturn. And these plumes of gas are just geysers coming from underneath the ice from what people believe are oceans. And it's possible that there is evidence for life in those plumes that indicate that under the ice there is life in the solar system. Now, you may ask, okay, how can we find out? We just need to fly through those plumes and collect samples of this vapor, water vapor. And Another possibility is to do it remotely, and I'm actually writing a paper now on doing that. But I hope that in my lifetime we'll find evidence. It could be either in the solar system for life elsewhere, or another planet around another star. And I would like to know if it's green, it has vegetation, if it's blue, it has oceans, or maybe it's covered with solar cells, you know, and that would also be interesting.
And just on a personal note, Professor Loeb comes from Israel, and my family origin is Palestinian. So I just want to say that, you know, this is one of the reasons where I really wanted to interview Professor Loeb. We already had a chat about this before the talk. This is what, you know, our people can do together, just this engagement in science and our common humanity. And I bet you if aliens came by, I think our peoples would just forget our differences and just deal with the aliens, you know. Anyway, thank you.
Completely agree, and I think we already forgot our differences.
Oh, yeah.